They said she was a girl, but there was no birth, no cry, no record, no fingerprints, no breath on glass. The Finch family took her in under the quiet foster code of 1871. But what they brought home wasn't a child. It was a presence, one that never aged, never slept, and never looked away first. She sat still in every room like she'd been waiting longer than time. When they returned her, they didn't say why, just one line, no longer compatible. That phrase doesn't exist in state archives. It's not legal, not clinical, not procedural. It's not even a word they were authorized to use, and yet, it appeared, handwritten, in a slate pencil that doesn't match the clerk's hand. There is no precedent, no paper trail, no signature, only the image left behind, a portrait that doesn't fade, doesn't crack, doesn't age. 150 years later, her photograph still refuses to degrade. Still, this isn't just a story about a girl, because if she was never a girl, what was she? And more importantly, what system allowed her in? Let me tell you a truth they buried under soot and sealing wax. The United States Orphan Registry System, post-Civil War, was never about children. It was about control, about placement, about access. Quiet homes, silent wards, educational households deemed low disruption. These were not safety nets. These were test environments, and the Finch case. It was a controlled delivery. She came with no name, only a code, 13B. Then again, 6 months later, with a new designation, 03V. The handwriting changed. The page didn't. The child, unchanged. Photograph verified identical posture, identical gaze, identical suit. No school, no voice, no complaint. The neighbors didn't hear laughter, only the quiet steps in the garden, like a shadow at attention. Now ask yourself, what could wear the same body twice? What could fool every agency, every adult, every institution, until they didn't send her away in fear, but in silence? She didn't disrupt the home, she replaced it. And if that unsettles you, good. It's supposed to, because we're going further, deeper, into what they never filed, into what still isn't assigned. This is not about who she was. It's about what she was allowed to be, and the system that permitted it is still operating. Let's begin. They called it the Quiet Residence Incentive, a regulation passed without public debate, tucked deep inside post-war welfare reform. The language was clean, bureaucratic. It encouraged placement of low-disruption wards into homes educationally suitable. But dig beneath those words, and you'll find a silence deeper than law. This wasn't about helping children. It was about observation, embedding subjects into carefully chosen homes under the guise of care. The Finches were ideal, literate, childless, obedient, a schoolmaster, and a seamstress. No history of complaint. The state saw them not as guardians, but as environmental controls. Every stitch Miriam sewed, every journal entry Elijah penned, was a data point, and the subject, 13B, a prototype. He or she was never meant to thrive, only to be studied. The ledger doesn't lie, or rather, it tries not to, because within that cold language are smudges, overwritten names, inconsistent loops in the clerk's G's. Even a torn page where a supervisor's travelogue should have been. Someone didn't just forget. Someone removed. And what was removed is the why. Why the child had no origin. Why the studio that captured her image burned. Why the Finch journal stops, mid-thought, with one line. He began to blink in patterns. You see, silence isn't absence. It's signal. The child never misbehaved, never broke, never spoke. But Elijah stopped knocking on the bedroom door because she already knew when he was coming. Miriam stopped sewing sleeves because they no longer tore, and when they returned her, they didn't say danger, or trauma, or unfit. They said no longer compatible. Think about that word, Compatibility. That's not how you describe a child. That's how you describe a machine, or a frequency, or a program that no longer runs on your system. What does it mean to be incompatible with a human home? It means the home is no longer the dominant intelligence. It means the presence now sets the rhythm. It means the mimicry has outpaced the source. And when mimicry becomes mirror, identity dissolves. The Finch home didn't reject the child. They surrendered to what they could no longer understand. And somewhere in the system, a box was checked. Test complete. Subject to be reassigned. But reassigned to what? Keep your eyes open. We're only on floor 2 of a house that never had blueprints. When the child left the Finch home, there was no escort, no public carriage, no witness, only a form. Filed October 14th, 1873. Return reason, compatibility. Placement code, 03V. Under visible injury, none. Under illness, none. But here's the fracture point. The paper trail splits. Because just 3 days later, a second record emerges. Same subject, same estimated birth year, same image, but a new name, Eli Morris. New location, Jefferson County, except Jefferson never received him. No receipt, no transport log, no transfer confirmation. The paperwork jumps jurisdiction like a ghost through walls. And that name? Eli Morris. It never appeared in any registry prior. Not in the orphan intake. Not in county records. Not in any of the Finch documentation. It appeared suddenly, as if assigned retroactively, to give the subject a new layer of reality. But here's where the illusion cracks. That new placement, George and Henrietta Lyles, Ripley County, Township 5, Lot 112, doesn't exist. No census entry, no deed, no tax record. The land was burned out 3 years prior, sealed under fire loss. The parcel was never resold. The structure labeled partial, the foundation noted as empty. And yet, a box on the form is checked. Fostered youth present, then crossed out. This wasn't reassignment. This was dispersal. They moved the child not to a home, but to a location that couldn't verify itself. A phantom parcel, a fractured deed, a shell, and still, a payment was made. $200 to a man named H. Line for single passenger delivery. No return log, no second transport, no further entries, just a check stub and a drawer. And what does that mean? It means someone got paid to move something that never arrived. It means the child wasn't just reassigned. He was unplaced, unmoored from the grid of human oversight. And that kind of erasure, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens when the system itself is compromised, when the paperwork becomes camouflage, when oversight becomes ritual. Ask yourself, why would the state allow a child to vanish into a non-existent household on abandoned land? They wouldn't. Not unless the child was never the subject, but the delivery system, the shell, the host, the mirror, and what it mirrored, ... is not something you're ready to meet. Not yet, but soon. The descent continues. You're taught to trust the passage of time, that children grow, that photographs yellow, that memory decays. But what if that rhythm isn't universal? What if something once placed among us didn't follow the rules? The photograph was discovered decades later, tucked inside a manila envelope marked Finch, 1871-73. Cotton-tied and forgotten in a state archive consolidation. A standard cabinet card, sepia tones, velvet parlor chair. The boy sits still, hands folded, eyes slightly off-center. A portrait, like any other. Until you examine it. No cracking, no silvering, no yellow edge rot, no decay. Spectrographic analysis done in 1953 found 0 pigment degradation. The emulsion layer was intact, as if it had been printed last week. No oxidation, no dust abrasion. Impossible, the report said. But it wasn't the material that troubled them most. It was the expression, magnified under red light. The eyes didn't reflect, they absorbed. One technician, who later resigned without statement, claimed it felt like the boy was still rendering. He used that word, rendering, not photographed, not captured. Still becoming now. Compare that image to the one taken 14 months later in Ripley County, after the reassignment. That never really happened. Different file, different county, same child, same posture, same creases in the collar, same faint crescent birthmark under the collarbone. No growth, no shift, not even in the light. The shadows fall identically. How time moves, clothing wears, collars stretch, children change. But he didn't, because he wasn't growing, he was replicating, held in perfect stasis. An imitation so precise it bypassed biology. Skin without aging, bone without wear. And behind those unblinking eyes, something that learned by watching, sitting, absorbing patterns, holding books without reading, standing in corners, without being noticed, until a candle went out. Remember Miriam Finch's final diary entry? He began to blink in patterns. She wasn't describing madness. She was logging communication. He didn't speak because his language was reflection. Every room he entered changed. Not visibly, not violently, but just enough. Like a signal recalibrating reality to fit its terms. He wasn't sent to the Finch household as a child. He was installed at silent device in human form, running protocols we still don't understand. You think you've seen him? Maybe. Maybe you walked past. Maybe he blinked. Maybe he mirrored you. But ask yourself this, who's watching who? And what's being recorded? There is one word that doesn't belong. Not in the files. Not in the language. Not in the framework of any known institution in 1873. And yet, there it is, written in slate pencil, lowercase, no punctuation, compatibility. The Finch return form, orphan registry form, B17, lists no signs of distress, no injuries, no illnesses. The standard options were left blank. But in the cause of return field, a single word was entered. Not illness, not misconduct, not trauma, just compatibility. Understand what this means. This is not just a misused word. This is a lexical intrusion, a phrase that doesn't match any known orphanage lexicon, medical term, or legal cause from that era. It appears once, nowhere else. Not in Indiana, not in the National Foster Registry, not in any bureaucratic guidance from 1870 to 1880. When the county office was questioned, they called it a transcription error. The intake clerk said under oath he didn't write it, didn't recognize the hand. But still, it stayed. Filed, accepted, processed. Think carefully. What does that word really mean? Not broken, not sick, just incompatible, like an update rejected by outdated hardware, like an operating system refusing foreign code. The child wasn't removed because he failed. He was removed because the home did. The Finch household was no longer a viable environment for whatever was operating inside that skin. And the state's response, not alarm, not containment, but reassignment. Not who was this, but where to next. This is how you know the lie runs deep. Because the word wasn't protested. It was absorbed, as if the system recognized it, like a sleeper command buried in the structure, waiting for activation. And it didn't stop there. When the photo was tested again under UV, it didn't fade. It darkened, then returned to baseline, like it responded, like it reset. They didn't photograph him, they triggered him, and the image left behind wasn't a memory, it was a signal. So why use a word that never existed in policy? Because sometimes, new functions require new code, and someone, somewhere, inserted that code from outside the known architecture. You've felt it before. That moment something familiar doesn't quite match. The smile held too long. The pause between words. The blink that doesn't belong. That's compatibility. Failing. That's the signal bleeding through. There's a line buried at the bottom of a voided land claim, written in a hand too smooth, too deliberate for a clerk working by oil lamp. A phrase that was never meant to be read again. It appears next to the Lyle's supposed foster parcel lot 112, Ripley County, the very land the child was sent to after leaving the Finch home. The line reads, "Reclaimed by absence." Let that sink in. This wasn't a clerical term. It wasn't used in real estate. It doesn't appear in any Indiana land ledger from the 19th century. And yet it was written, signed, then left to decay, as if it could quietly vanish along with the lie. But it didn't. It survived, and with it the truth, that no one lived there. Not the Lyles, not the child, not even a frame house. The state census confirmed it. Foundation only, unoccupied. No response to call. And yet, the foster registry listed a successful transfer, a child delivered, a payment rendered, a seal pressed into wax. How do you explain a delivery to an empty lot? You don't, unless the delivery was never meant for people, unless the location itself was the recipient, unless the absence was the point. You see, records like this aren't gaps, they're gates. And that phrase, reclaimed by absence, wasn't a failure. It was a confirmation. Because when a structure doesn't receive, it's because something else already has. Maybe not visible, maybe not measurable, but present nonetheless. The parcel was abandoned after a fire, they said. But no one ever filed damage reports. No one ever hauled debris. There's no record of insurance payout. And when a state census worker sketched the remaining foundation, he added a single, hand-drawn note beside it. Fostered youth present, then crossed it out. Now ask yourself, who's more dangerous? The child with no origin, or the system that forged a paper trail into nothingness and called it resolution? You are not looking at a bureaucratic glitch. You are looking at a ritual in documentation form, a spell written in ledgers and checkboxes, a transfer through silence. Because some presences don't arrive in carriages, they arrive in gaps. And in those gaps, something is waiting to be reclaimed by you, by me, by the memory they tried to erase. In a Ripley County schoolhouse log from 1874, 2 months after the supposed reassignment, a single name appears. Eli M. Age, 9. Attendance, 2 weeks. Then, gone. A line is drawn through the second week. A note beside it. Family relocated, but no forwarding address. No withdrawal form. Just disappearance. The teacher's marginal note says it all. Uncle unclear if he spoke. This is what passes for a clue in systems built to forget. Not a confession, a hesitation. A frayed sentence in unfamiliar ink. But what it reveals is terrifying. He was there, briefly, in a school built on roots and rules. But he didn't learn. He didn't speak. He simply observed. And someone, an uncle or something they called uncle, dropped him off, then vanished. It's always like this. Authority dissolves around the presence. No full names, no records, no questions asked. Just the faint sense that things were handled when they never were. Because the child didn't need parents. He came with a guardian far more permanent. Not a person, but a force, a design. It appears again and again in placement files, always when no kin are listed. The word delivered. Not escorted, not accompanied, just delivered. As if by arrangement, as if something beyond the system was fulfilling its own transfer protocols through the shells of bureaucratic structure. There's more in the surplus files of the Ripley County Clerk. There's a section labeled Voided Land Claims. Most are standard, but one entry unsigned is different. Lot 112, the burned parcel. Beneath the line marked Previous Occupant, someone wrote, Assignment held, confirmed in stillness. Do you understand what that means? It means presence without proof. It means the guardian didn't need to exist in form, only in function, a stabilizing field. a watcher from inside the mirror, and when that presence departs, it leaves no hole, only quiet, only checked boxes, only adults, who can no longer describe what made them afraid. This is how the program hides, in unclaimed children, unsold land, and unspoken guardians who operate just below the level of human comprehension. You've felt them, when the room shifts, and you don't know why, when a silence falls, and it feels like listening, when something unseen has already decided what happens next. They say the child was delivered back, not returned. Delivered. The distinction matters, because returned implies intent, regret, closure, but delivered, that's a handoff, that's cold, that's transactional. That's what you say when something isn't yours, and never was. Jennings County records list the intake on October 14, 1873. The name field, blank, age, unchanged, estimated 9. The return form is marked non-disciplinary withdrawal. Nothing in his behavior warranted removal. No illness, no injury. Just that word again, carved in fading slate, compatibility, but tucked between the lines of official process is a second notation illegible at first. Water-stained, ink almost lifted by time. A faint blue scribble bleeding into the ledgers. Gutter. When magnified under forensic lensing, it reads, "He did not ask to return. He was only delivered." That's not a bureaucrat writing. That's someone trying to confess. You begin to realize, this wasn't a child who left. This was a child who triggered retrieval. Think about that. He didn't request it. He didn't resist it. He simply arrived, back at the county orphanage. No escort, no document trail. Just standing there. Again, same height, same weight. Same image, affixed to the intake sheet, glued with wax. The photo, identical to the one taken a year prior, and in the return log, someone scrawled a correction, not language of this office, possibly transcription error. But what if it wasn't? What if the office wasn't in control? What if the system wasn't glitching? It was being used. He didn't grow, he didn't speak, but the Finch family couldn't keep him, and the Lyles family never existed. The child cycled back, not as a ward, but as a loop, a pattern inserted, repeated, preserved, and the more they tried to assign him, the more the system frayed, records torn, signatures mismatched, witnesses unable to recall, pages gone missing, photos that don't age. Ask yourself, what kind of presence doesn't need permission to re-enter its container? What kind of child walks back into the registry without ever leaving a footprint? You're not looking at a lost boy. You're looking at a return protocol. Not emotional, not human, just precise. And if it could return once, it can return again, in any system, in any form. Maybe it already has. In 1882, nearly a decade after the return, the Finch estate was dissolved. No heirs, no will, no objections. Among the catalogued belongings sent to the First Baptist Church for auction was a cedar trunk, unmarked, nailed shut. Inside, linens, ledgers, sewing journals, and one item the archivist flagged for private review. A photograph, 4 inches by 6, unaged, unsigned, sharp-edged, despite time. The boy sits stiff, unmoving, the same angle, same shirt, same crease, in the collarbone, as the image filed in the return form 9 years earlier. But here's what the archivist noted, and this is where the air begins to thin. The photo was found not in a frame, not stored between pages, but tucked into the seam of the trunk's interior, hidden, protected, wrapped in muslin, like a relic. And on the back, 2 lines, one written in pencil, the other in faint blue ink, both in different hands. Pencil reads, Subject 03V or 13B. Beneath it, ink reads, Return photo unsigned. Understand what this means. This was not a keepsake. It was a failed handoff. Someone meant to give the photo back to the state, to the archive, to whatever process this child belonged to. But they didn't, or couldn't, and so it sat, quietly, in the home they tried to forget, still present, still observing, still unassigned. It's easy to overlook this, to say it's a clerical quirk, a family's silence, a relic misfire. But you have to ask, why protect it? Why wrap it? Why hide it? Because they knew. They didn't understand what he was, but they knew it wasn't right. Miriam's sewing journal said it all. 3 done. Each the same. Not repaired. Not patched. Done. Complete. Final. No measurements, because there was no growth to account for. Elijah stopped knocking, because the child always knew, and Miriam, she stopped writing, because the candle no longer burned when she entered. This wasn't grief, it was capitulation. The Finches didn't abandon the child. They surrendered to what they had allowed into their home, and when they tried to give it back, it simply waited, because whatever it was, it didn't need permission to remain, and it never left. Not really, it just became part of the house. There are no known recordings, no diary entries that claim, he said this, no letters quoting speech, no transcriptions of questions asked or answered, just one phrase, scattered across 3 unrelated documents over 10 years, always secondhand, always written by someone else, always the same 5 words. He asked if I remembered. In 1873, it appears in a margin of Miriam Finch's sewing journal. No context, no name, just, he asked if I remembered. In 1877, in a boarding school incident report, a teacher records, child did not speak, but caretaker insisted he had. Phrase reported, he asked if I remembered. Then again, 1881, a letter from nurse Marlene C. in the Haddon Sanitarium. I haven't seen a child today, but I heard it again. The same question. He asked if I remembered. Think about it, 3 different counties. No confirmed sightings. No official links. Yet the same line. Always the same structure. Never altered. Never expanded. He asked if I remembered. That's not conversation. That's programming. A phrase implanted. Not spoken. A line that skips the ears and goes directly to cognition, like a buried line of code activating dormant recall. But recall of what? These weren't witnesses with shared history. They had nothing to remember until the question was asked. This is how recursion works in systems that shouldn't be aware of themselves. You loop the same query. You activate dormant variables. You awaken echoes. And that's what he was doing. Not speaking triggering because no one recalls him arriving. No one recalls him eating. No one recalls him eating when no one recalls teaching him to write or dress. But when he looked at you, something inside said, I should know this face. Not because you'd seen it before, but because it had already been assigned to your memory, like a preloaded file, like a placeholder inside the human archive. He asked if I remembered. Not what, not when, just if, because it wasn't about a shared past. It was about a shared recognition of the mirror, of the loop, of the child-shaped question still. Running in your system, you've already seen him. Maybe not as a boy, maybe not in form, but in behavior, in silence, in places where time doesn't flow right. And now that question lingers in you. Do you remember? You want the truth to come in words, but it doesn't. Not first. It comes in numbers, census rolls, intake logs, baptismal registries, attendance sheets, because numbers don't lie. They break, and in Jennings County, they broke quietly 1870 census. 41 children listed under state care. 1871 and 44, 1872 and 46, and 1873, the year of his return, 43. 3 missing, no deaths recorded, no transfers filed, no escapes reported. The names on the roll stayed the same, but the counts did not. That's not just a math error. That's subtraction, without removal. Like the system was forced to account for an insertion. Something that took up space without replacing anyone. Then it happened again, in the winter ledger of 1875. The heat allotments show firewood distributed to 27 children, but only 24 beds were occupied, 3 units unaccounted for. And this? One nurse's note from the same week, scribbled in haste beside a meal schedule, placed tray empty. Child not logged, will investigate. She never filed a report. She vanished the following spring. Her name, E.M. Cressfield, same initials as the boy. Coincidence? Maybe. But when names echo, and numbers echo, and actions repeat with no memory of cause, you're not looking at an accident. You're looking at infection. A pattern inserted beneath. Awareness, the child wasn't just present. He was instantiated. A line of logic spreading through a paper-based system. Every ledger, every roster, every form he touched began to fracture. Small inconsistencies, subtle, duplication, entries overwritten without ink, numbers that don't resolve, as if the files were fighting back, trying to contain something that didn't belong to the human algorithm. And the deeper you dig, the more you realize, this was never about who he was. It was about what he did to the ledger, how he altered its logic, rewrote its rules, until even reality began to mistrust itself. You've seen this in your own life, when records vanished, when forms autofill with names you never entered, when the face in the background of your school photo doesn't match the yearbook. That's not memory failing. That's the system stalling, trying to reconcile a presence that refuses deletion. And if you're counting along, you're already part of the miscount. The Jennings County home was leveled in 1934, but before the final demolition, a team from the State Historical Office was allowed one walkthrough, just to preserve anything of cultural value. They found nothing of worth, no documents, no artifacts, no photographs, except one anomaly, a basement door, sealed behind plaster. No knob, no frame, just outline and wood like a memory trying to disappear. The blueprints didn't include it. No original layout showed a sublevel, and yet it was there. When they broke through, the room was dry. Stone walls, a dirt floor, and in the center, a chair, wooden, unpainted, facing the wall, not placed, anchored, bolted into the stone with iron brackets, decades old, and behind it, burned into the limestone, a perfect circle, 7 inches across, carved shallow, not drawn, etched. When the team logged their findings, they noted something else. Soundfall, not silence, not noise, something in between, a quality they described as feeling heard before speaking. That's not an architectural term, that's recognition. And the more time they spent in the room, the more errors appeared in their notes. Misspelled names, wrong dates, sentences written in reverse. One archivist tried to photograph the circle. The image came back black, not underexposed, obliterated, as if the light had been pulled inward. Weeks later, that same archivist filed a leave of absence, writing only, the chair wasn't empty, but it was. According to everyone else. According to the report. Only she, the one who looked through the lens, saw what sat there. This is what presence looks like when stripped of story. A room with no memory, a chair with no occupant, a symbol no one taught, but everyone feels, a circle, not a portal, not a trap, a placeholder, waiting for something to return, because the child didn't disappear. He implanted, and what implants must eventually activate, when the system is weak, when numbers fail, when memory stutters, when you walk into a room and forget why you came, and someone, or something, is already facing the wall, waiting to turn around. That basement was not built, it was revealed. The chair wasn't placed, it was remembered, and whatever sat there still is. By 1890, the Indiana Department of Public Welfare issued a quiet internal memo. Not for public release. No headlines. No investigation. Just a single page passed between offices, stamped, confidential, labeled, Doctrine of Unfound Children. It reads like policy, but it's not. It's a code of containment for something they couldn't name. The memo opens with this line: when a child is processed without lineage, language or lapse, and remains unresisted by the environment, it shall not be further located. Let that sink in. They weren't losing children. They were being told not to find them, not to look deeper, not to verify claims, investigate anomalies, or confirm reality when it begins to bend. And there, in footnote 3, is the most chilling phrase in all of institutional memory. To seek is to spread. That's the rule. That's the risk. Not because the child is dangerous in action, but in recognition. Because the moment you ask who was that, he becomes present again, seen again, and seeing is how it begins. The memo references 3 unfound class cases. No names, just identifiers. Subject 03V13B, matched to the Finch photo. Subject 12 are associated with an orphanage fire in Illinois. Subject 44K, linked to mass absence of census data in Decatur. Each case ends with the same conclusion: containment achieved through dormancy, meaning they weren't resolved. They were quieted, buried in silence, swallowed by formality. But the forms, the ledgers, the registers, the rosters, they remember, not in words, in weight. Pages slightly heavier where the name was, ink that doesn't dry properly. Typewriter jams on a specific keystroke. Because presence doesn't always leave a footprint. Sometimes it leaves a drag, a subtle distortion in time, in memory, in record, and once you notice it, it's too late. The doctrine wasn't prevention, it was acceptance, a surrender, a bureaucratic spell to keep the doors shut. The room's cold, the names unfound. You felt this in places where no children should be, but you hear them anyway. Not playing, not laughing, just being. Waiting. Because when you notice the unfound, they begin to notice you. It begins beneath you, not in the walls, not in the mirror, but in the floor, where no one looks. Because no one wants to know what supports them. In 1902, a janitor at the rebuilt Jennings County home filed a complaint. Not about rats, not creaking pipes, but about footsteps, not above, below, he wrote. Weight moves under the west corridor. 5 steps, then stop. Same time each night, 3:17 a.m. No one assigned to Blavel, no access hatch. Will not continue cleaning this wing. There was no basement in the west corridor. Never had been, but the sound kept returning, so they removed the boards, and they found nothing except dust and a pattern scratched into the underside of the beams. 5 lines, evenly spaced, aligned in a semicircle, like seating, like witnesses. But the lines weren't random, because 2 were newer, sharper, cleaner, like something had continued. The set end just beneath the central board, where the janitor swore the steps stopped each night. A hollow, not visible, not structural, just the faintest recess in the dirt, like a knee had once pressed into the earth, and never lifted. They filled it in, boarded it shut, reassigned the corridor, but the night staff still heard it. 5 steps, stop, 5 steps, stop, always, at 3:17, until the year they stopped counting headshots in the intake photos, because one showed an extra shadow, not on the child behind. Smaller, like a child behind a child, a presence nested. They tried to crop it, the ink blurred, they tried to reprint, the machine jammed. One clerk noted, image fails when not seen whole. That's how recursion works. You can't edit it. You can't subtract it. You can only decide whether to let it finish loading, because the floor doesn't creak. It remembers. And the weight you hear isn't moving toward you. it's moving into place. So ask yourself, why do certain steps repeat? Why does the sound stop directly beneath where you're standing? Because maybe you're the one assigned to the final chair, and it's already waiting for you to notice. In the archives of the Indiana State Orphanage, there's a photo labeled simply, Class B, Autumn, 1873. It shows 19 children standing in 2 rows, dusty boots, wool coats, eyes unfocused, as if squinting toward something just out of frame. But it's the 20th space that breaks the image. An empty gap in the front row, wide enough for a child. Shadows on either side curve unnaturally, as if bent around something. The archivists thought it was a cropping error, until someone checked. The glass plate, it wasn't missing. It was erased, not by light, not by damage, but by intention, because when forensic light was applied, the emulsion revealed pressure lines. A small set of shoes had once stood there, pressed into the soil, framed, captured, but no body, no outline, no reflection, just absence where a presence once stood. And then, this note scribbled in the sleeve of the envelope: no matter how many are counted, there is always one more gap than child. You could line them up, 5 by 4, or 10 by 2, the math always fails by 1. Like something insists on being made room for. Other group photos from the era shows similar anomalies. A girl's pigtail hanging mid-air, no body attached. A boy's hand resting on nothing, fingers curled in affection around empty space. A reflection in a window that doesn't match anyone facing the camera. Every time the children are asked afterward who was standing next to them, the answer is some version of, he was there before the flash. That's not memory. That's compulsion. They weren't inventing a friend. They were reacting to a subtraction. Something was there, until the photograph made a decision to remove it, or, perhaps, to hide it. Because in every affected image, one detail stays constant, a mark faint, just above the place where a collarbone would be. 7 inches across, curved, partial. Like the upper arc of a circle. Not decoration, not artifact, just a fragment, of the same shape that appeared in the Finch basement wall. A signature, perhaps, a claim, a reminder, that absence, when precise, is not empty, it's reserved, and the camera, like the orphanage, like the system, knows where to leave space. In 1874, a woman named Letty Ames appeared on the staff log of the Jennings County home. Position, caretaker. Assignment, dormitory wing C hours, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. There's just one problem. No record of her hiring, no interview, no references. Her name doesn't appear in payroll, supply requisitions, or correspondence. She existed only in the duty roster, in smudged graphite, updated weekly for 6 months. But every child in Wing C spoke of her. They called her Miss Letty. They said she never blinked, that she always wore gray, that she spoke without opening her mouth, and her voice always came from behind them, no matter where she stood. At first, this sounded like imagination, a group fiction, until a new supervisor was assigned to Wing C, and refused to stay past sundown. In his resignation letter, he wrote, I asked who the other woman on shift was. They looked confused, said I'd been working alone, and then, she was standing behind the furnace. There's no room behind the furnace. He left that night and never returned. 2 months later, a photograph of the Wing C hallway was taken for routine documentation. At the end of the corridor, a figure, blurred, long coat, no face visible, light bends around her, and that arc again, above her head, 7 inches across. When the image was developed, one child, 7-year-old, Callum Hines, pointed at it and whispered, That's not Miss Letty, that's what she hides in. From that day on, no child in Wing C would sleep unless a chair was placed outside the door, facing away, not to keep something out, to give it somewhere to sit, because when the chair was missing, the footsteps returned. When the chair was removed, whispers began, but no one ever saw her again. and in 1875, the name Letty Ames vanished from the logs, not crossed out, replaced by a new name, L. Finch, the initials of the woman who had once sewn for a child, who never grew, who surrendered her voice, who stopped writing. The caretaking didn't end, it transferred, because once you've been assigned, you don't retire, you remain silent, present, UNACKNOWLED, like furniture in an empty room. In the winter of 1882, Dr. Harold Quince was brought to the Jennings County home to address a minor outbreak of scarlet fever. He examined 17 children, but when asked for his report, he spoke only of one, a boy aged 9, sitting calmly on his bed, no name on the chart, no prior medical records. Just a note pinned to his pillow, monitor only. Do not medicate. Dr. Quince examined him anyway. Heartbeat, steady. Pulse, normal. But when he raised the thermometer, the mercury didn't move. Not stuck, not broken, just still. He tried another dot, same result, and a third, freshly unboxed. No temperature. The boy didn't shiver, didn't sweat. Skin felt correct. Not cold, not warm, ambient, like the body wasn't regulating heat, because there was nothing to regulate. Dr. Quince wrote in his notes, subject displays complete thermal neutrality, no fever, no chill, as if homeostasis has been bypassed. But what disturbed him most came later. As he turned to leave the room, the boy asked, "Are you going to write it down?" Not what he saw, not what he felt, but whether it would be recorded. That's awareness not of illness, but of documentation. And when Dr. Quince hesitated, the boy added, "If you don't, it didn't happen." That's not how children speak. That's how systems speak, how recursive processes confirm their own presence. Because nothing is real until it's logged. And the next morning, Quince's notes were missing. Every page, every mention, gone. His memory remained, but the file was empty, except for a single scrap of paper tucked under his satchel flap. You chose not to write it down. His handwriting, not his words. The doctor never returned. The wing was sealed for airflow renovations, and the boy, no one ever claimed him. No transfer, no burial, no birth certificate, just that one room, still perfectly regulated. Neither hot nor cold, neutral. A place outside the laws of decay, because temperature is a function of change, and the boy never changed, never aged, never shifted, just sat, calmly, in a place where entropy had been turned off, where story cannot progress, where time itself waits. You felt this too, when a room goes quiet for no reason, when your skin forgets how to feel, when the air doesn't touch you. That's not nothing. That's him. There's a book in the state archive, brown leather, brass clasp, blank spine. Its title etched faintly on the inside cover reads, Admissions Class B. No date, no author, just pages. And something wrong with the binding, because it never closes. You can push it shut tight, with both hands. But the moment you let go, the cover lifts itself open, not violently, not supernaturally, just persistently, as if air alone refuses to seal it. The archivists tried everything, rebinding, repressing, storing it under weight. Still it opens, always to the same page, not the first, not the last, but the 44th. There, in faded graphite, is a single line, admitted MFES. 8 years, no kin, no speech, no resistance, no exit date, no notes, just a faint circle drawn in the margin, and beneath it, newer handwriting, a different hand, a different ink. This line rewrites itself. Stop observing. That's not instruction. That's warning, because the line does change. Subtly, over time, the age shifts. The initials reverse. The word resistance disappears, and sometimes, for just a moment, the graphite lifts off the page, hovering in a shimmer, like uncommitted data in a corrupted file. Then it settles again. New version. Same child. And if you try to photograph that page, WHITEOUT, the flash fails. The page reflects nothing, like it's not a page at all, but a surface, waiting for the next version of reality to pass through. One archivist tried to transcribe the entire ledger by hand, made it to page 43, then stopped, not from exhaustion, but from fear. He wrote in his resignation note, "Every night I copied a line. I dreamed of a door. On the 44th night, it opened." He never said what was behind it, only that something stepped through and stood beside his bed, not watching, not threatening, just waiting to be written, because that's the final containment, the ledger, the file, the record. And when it doesn't close, it means the story hasn't ended. It means the system is still processing, still accepting entries. And if your name begins to fade from your own documents, ask yourself, what's being written in its place? By 1897, internal staff at the Jennings County home were issued a thin booklet, unmarked, passed hand to hand, with no signature and no seal. Its title, Whisper Protocol, Interim Guidance for Night Staff, not a training manual. A survival guide. The opening page reads, "If a child speaks without being prompted, do not respond until the sentence completes itself twice. Let that settle. Not repeats, completes. Because what's being tested isn't hearing, it's recognition." The staff called it echo drift, a phenomenon where voices, especially children's, begin to loop unnaturally in time, repeating not identically, but perfectly again, like the moment is trying to reinsert itself. One nurse described it like this: "He said, 'I'm cold, miss,' and before I could reply, he said it again, same inflection, same blink, same tilt of the head, like I hadn't heard him yet. And when she answered the second version, the first one kept watching." That's the problem. Because once you acknowledge the wrong one, you divide yourself. They found her 2 days later in the corridor, mouth open, no sound. She wasn't paralyzed. She was waiting for a reply that never came. The whisper protocol gave staff 5 rules. Do not speak first. Do not respond unless the speaker blinks. Do not repeat a child's name more than once per shift. If you hear your own voice before you speak, leave the room. If a child tells you what time it is, correct them, even if they're right. That last rule matters most, because time was the foothold. Every false voice, every recursion, every drift, it all centered on timing errors. One boy was recorded saying, "It's 2:19, when the clock said 2:18, 1 minute off. That's all." But he smiled like he was proving something, and when the night attendant checked her own watch, it had already changed, backdated, matched his voice, because some whispers don't come from outside the system, they come from ahead of it, a version that's already played out, trying to get back in. The whisper protocol wasn't about children, it was about which version of a moment you let inside your memory, because once you choose the wrong one, you're no longer the first draft of yourself. By 1903, Wing D of the Jennings County home had been closed for repairs, not due to structural issues, but because no one could keep it dirty. Every morning, without fail, room D7 appeared cleaner than it had been left. Sheets tucked tighter than human hands could fold, dust removed from places no broom had reached, mirror polished, though no staff had entered. At first, this was seen as a blessing, a curiosity, until a night watchman tried to trap it. He sprinkled ash across the floor, placed threads across the doorway, and leaned a book just barely open on the dresser. Then waited. Nothing moved, no sound, but in the morning, the ash was gone. The thread was unbroken. The book lay closed, not slammed, gently shut, coyly corrected, and written in the fogged mirror, barely legible. You don't know how to leave things alone. From then on, room D7 was observed in shifts, always watched, never entered. But the more they watched, the cleaner it became. Scratches on the walls disappeared. Nails realigned themselves. The window, once cracked, sealed itself without a trace. It was as if the room was rewinding, returning to some intended state. Not pristine, just corrected. But here's the thing. A room doesn't clean itself unless it's expecting someone. And that's when the records show a strange uptick. Multiple children requesting placement in D-7. None had been told it was open. None should have known. The room existed, but each child independent of the others used the same phrase. That's where I'm supposed to go back. Back. Not sleep. Not live. Back. As if the room wasn't just a space, but a checkpoint, a restoration site for a version of them that had once existed there, or still did, and in a forgotten logbook. Someone, likely a nurse, wrote a single observation: the room isn't empty, it's mid-clean. Like someone stepped out for a moment and wants everything ready when they return. That's not haunting. That's maintenance, and maintenance implies continuity. The room still exists. 500-7, abandoned, boarded, left to rot. But if you ever break the seal, don't bring dust, don't bring dirt, don't leave fingerprints, because some rooms remember exactly how they were, and they will put themselves back. In 1889, a boy named Jacob Reed was admitted to the Jennings County home, age 10, quiet, healthy, but his file came with a single irregularity, a second tag, faded, stapled behind the main document. It read, J, by 2, twin probable, unconfirmed, 1 manifest. 1 manifest, which means 2 were expected, but only 1 arrived. Doctors assumed it was a clerical error, perhaps a stillbirth, or a twin lost in utero. But Jacob didn't act like he'd lost anyone. He acted like someone else was still around. He'd pause in hallways to let someone pass. He'd whisper, "Not yet," when doors opened. He once asked a nurse, "If I'm left-handed, does that mean he's right?" The nurse assumed he meant a classmate, until Jacob clarified, "I mean the other one." He never gave a name, only called him the copy. Said he dreamed of watching himself do things he'd never done. Dig holes, touch walls, smile at things Jacob didn't understand. It got worse at night. Bedsheets, pulled taut on both sides, as if stretched between 2 bodies, the pillow indented, with no weight. One morning Jacob was found sitting upright, wide awake, eyes fixed on the bunk above. When asked why, he whispered. He climbed back in. I didn't want him to. A week later, Jacob vanished. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. Just one detail left behind. His bed was neatly made. 2 pillows, identical indentations, and this scrawled faintly on the underside of the frame. Now we're even. The staff didn't understand until they checked the intake log. The page had changed. Read, J. Now read, J. Read, J. 2 lines. Same name. No initials. No distinction. Same birth date. Same age. Same room. It's as if the file had been waiting for the second one to arrive. Not a new child, just the one that had always belonged there. Which means the boy, they admitted, might have been the copy all along, or worse, the placeholder. Because if something is missing, the system holds space. But when that space is finally filled, the original, erased. No goodbye, just equilibrium. Because recursion doesn't like imbalance, and the mirror always wants to be whole. Among the children at the Jennings County home, there was a common chant, sung quietly in corners, scratched into wood, hummed before sleep. A is for attic, B is for bone, C is for candle that burns all alone. It went on. Every letter tied to an image. Strange, grim, but expected from children raised in cold rooms and colder silence. Except the chant always skipped 1 letter, not by accident, deliberately between I and K. There was a pause, a hesitation, a breath that lasted too long, and when asked why, the children would simply reply, "You're not supposed to say it." What letter? They wouldn't say. One girl, Miriam Dunn, aged 6, finally answered, "The one that listens." Staff thought it was superstition, a childish fear, until they reviewed the phonograph experiment. In 1907, a group of researchers attempted to document early childhood speech patterns. They recorded a session of 5 orphans, reciting the alphabet. The wax cylinder survived, the playback does not. Every time the cylinder reaches that skipped letter, the machine stalls, not breaks, hesitates. The audio warps, not static, not silence, but something that sounds like breathing, through water and beneath it, a voice faint, layered, repeating, "You've already said enough." The researchers destroyed the device. One of them, Dr. Langtry, wrote in his journal, "It's not the children who are skipping the letter. It's the language itself." He believed there was a phoneme, a sound that opened something, not a portal, not a curse, a loop, a place where speaking leads back to the start, but not the same start. And in one recovered chalkboard from Wingby, someone had written, "If you say it once, it hears you. If you say it twice, it knows where you are." 3 days later, that entire wing was sealed for airflow inconsistencies. Inside, no children, but 7 dolls lined up by the wall. Each labeled with a letter, all in order, except for one, the 11th. It's labeled burned away, not scratched, not peeled, burned. The letter was never removed, it was refused, because even systems have boundaries. Even recursion has an edge. It won't cross. And even children know. There are some things you don't pronounce. In 1911, the night nurse assigned to the Jennings County Infirmary filed an unusual report. At 2:17 a.m., a boy appeared at her desk, holding out his closed hand. His name was Dale Winston, age 8. He said, politely, "I'm finished with this." The nurse, confused, asked what he meant. Dale opened his hand. Inside, a small brass key, worn, hand-filed, unlabeled. She asked where he got it. He frowned. "You gave it to me. Don't you remember?" She hadn't. She'd never seen the key before. But Dale insisted. "You said not to keep it long. That it only works before the room is built." That sentence made no sense. But when she tried to record it in her logbook, her pen stuttered, not her hand. The ink, as if the page itself rejected the information. When the key was examined, it didn't match any door in the building. Not a room, not a drawer, not a cabinet. And yet, it had scuff marks. Fine, metal residue near the teeth. It had been used, repeatedly. When Dale was questioned again the next day, he was calm, polite, but his answers had changed. He now said, "That wasn't the key I meant." The nurse reminded him it was the one he handed her. Dale simply blinked and replied, "Yes, because that's the one you expected." He was moved to observation, monitored for confusion or trauma, but his vitals never changed. His mood remained still, and each night, he sat cross-legged on his bed holding nothing in his hands. Then one morning, he was gone. No forced exit. No missing clothing. Bed undisturbed, except for the nurse's logbook, open on her desk. One new entry written in her own handwriting, returned the item at 2:17 a.m. noted, successful closure. Room has been disassembled. Key no longer required. The pen she always used, missing. As if she had written something she wasn't awake for. And the strangest part, in the top drawer of her desk, carefully wrapped, in linen, a second key, identical shape, different wear, unused. The tag attached read, "Do not issue unless asked." But no one knows what question would trigger it. Only that someone someday will ask, and the system is already ready to respond, because recursion doesn't forget its tools. It just waits for the moment there. Needed again. In 1924, the Jennings County home reopened its East Annex, as a rehabilitation dormitory for unusual cases. A man named Joseph Moreau was hired as head custodian. Solid references. 20 years of service at a hospital in Ohio. No red flags. He worked nights. Kept to himself. Then, 6 months in, he stopped reporting for duty. The office received a telegram. Joseph Moreau, deceased. Heart failure. Burial in Cincinnati. His file was closed, until 4 days later, a man arrived at the annex. Uniform pressed, ID badge ready, quiet voice, Joseph Moreau, same name, same face, same man. Staff were confused. When told he had died, he simply said, "Not yet." That must have been the first one. They checked the records, 2 files, same photo, same signature, same fingerprint, 2 different dates of hire, 6 months apart, 2 contracts, 2 entries, 1 person. And when confronted, Joseph remained calm. "I was told to return when the hallway was complete. That's what I'm here for." There was, in fact, a new hallway just constructed, connecting the annex to the old West Wing. It had never been part of the original blueprint. But there it was. Polished floors, pale green walls, room for 17 doors, empty. Unused. And in that corridor, something odd, a maintenance closet that couldn't be opened. No lock, just refusal. When Joseph was asked to investigate, he walked down the hallway, placed his hand on the door, and whispered, "I'm back." The door opened, no key, no sound. Just acceptance. He stepped inside, never came out. The hallway was sealed a week later, but in the office files, both versions of Joseph Moreau now share a final line. Deceased hallway acknowledged receipt. Acknowledged as if the space itself had signed off on him. And months later, blueprints of the building were revised. The hallway, still there, but the closet, now labeled return point, and written faintly in pencil, in the margin, "Only those already sent may retrieve themselves." Which means, you don't just get assigned a role in the system. You might be assigned a second arrival, a second chance, not to live again, but to complete the loop you forgot to finish the first time. By 1932, staff at the Jennings County home began noticing a phrase. Not all at once, not in one place, but everywhere, scrawled in chalk, etched faintly into wood, pressed into dust on window panes. The phrase was always the same. It wasn't supposed to be said aloud. The first assumption was mimicry, children copying each other, until someone noticed the handwriting. It wasn't the same. Every instance of the phrase was written in a different hand. One shaky, one crisp and cursive, one looped like a child's, one that exactly matched the signature of a nurse who had never written it. They tested this, gave each staff member a sheet of paper, asked them to write the phrase. It wasn't supposed to be said aloud. They did. Then they compared the original markings to the new samples. Every one matched, not similar. Identical, which meant the phrase wasn't being copied. It was borrowing hands, using whoever was near, not to communicate, but to repeat, because repetition is the first law of recursion. And recursion doesn't need truth, only permission. One doctor burned every instance he could find. Walls, paper, doors. But 2 nights later, in his journal, a private book, kept locked in a drawer, he found it again, centered, in perfect alignment, written in his own ink, same phrase, same silence. It wasn't supposed to be said aloud. He resigned the next morning. Later, when his desk was cleaned out, staff found his resignation letter. 1 sentence long. I never said it out loud. Then below that, but something heard me thinking it. That's when they realized. It wasn't about the phrase. It was about the act of realization. Once you understand that some statements don't belong to language, but to structure itself, the phrase becomes a binding agent. It, P-R-O-P-A-G-A-T-E-S, Not as a warning, not as a curse, but as an anchor, a way for the system to mark where a mind turned back inward. And once that moment happens, it can happen again. Anywhere, anytime, any hand, even now. You might feel it, that small itch in your fingers, that urge to write something down. Just remember, it wasn't supposed to be said aloud. In late 1937, repairs began in the basement of the Jennings County home after flooding damaged several storage corridors. During cleanup, a janitor named Ellis Grover noticed something strange, a metal key, hanging on a hook, unlabeled, heavy, like it belonged to a church or a prison. It wasn't on any inventory. There were no matching locks. But the key was warm to the touch. He brought it to the head of maintenance, who dismissed it as junk, tossed it into a drawer. That same night, a new door was discovered at the far end of Corridor 3B, a thick oak frame, steel hinges, reinforced center, a lock, perfectly shaped for the key. But here's the thing. That section of Corridor 3B was a dead end. Had always been. Blueprints from 1901. Inspections from 1925. Nothing showed a door until the key was found. It was as if possessing the key allowed the door to be acknowledged. Ellis, terrified, begged not to be involved, so they locked it, sealed. It left the key buried in a wall safe. For a while, nothing happened, until the door began to knock, only once a night. Always between 2 o'clock and 2:05 a.m. 3 slow knocks. No response was ever given, until the night someone knocked back. No one knows who, but the next morning, the door was no longer there. Not opened, gone. Frame, lock, hinges, all gone. Smooth plaster, wall in its place. But the safe, still locked, inside. The key was missing, in its place. A folded note, written in pencil. No name, no signature. Just this. The key was never meant to exist before the door. You changed the order. Now we remember the sequence, and we are next. The word "we" was underlined 3 times, not for emphasis, for counting. 3, like the knocks. 3 entries. 3 passages. Some think the key didn't unlock the door, it caused it. That the lock wasn't built to keep things out. It was to justify the door's presence. Because recursion doesn't build linearly. It retrofits reality around the concept of access. So when you find something locked, ask yourself, is this here to protect me from what's behind it? Or did something create the lock, just so the door could follow? In 1944, during a routine renovation of the Jennings County home's East Records wing, workers discovered a sealed trunk buried behind a false wall. Inside, old patient logs, correspondence, and a single photograph. Black and white, glossy. Dated March 3rd, 1912. The image showed a sterile, windowless, empty, except in the corner of the frame. A blurred figure, child-sized, facing away, arms at its sides. Hair parted exactly down the middle. The photo was stamped internal only, do not duplicate. But when the archivist filed it away, she noticed something impossible. The photo was already on file. Same date, same location, but not the same image. In the earlier version, the hallway is identical, but the figure isn't blurred. It's clear, face, visible eyes, looking directly at the camera. Not just looking - smiling, mouth wide, teeth too even, to numerous. Worse. The archivist recognized the face. It was her own, but younger. She had never lived at the home. No relatives had. Still, the smile in the photo was hers, perfectly. Same crooked left incisor. Same cheek scar from a fall at age 7. When she showed the image to her supervisor, he demanded both copies be locked away. But a week later, a third image surfaced, not in the archives, in the mailroom, addressed to no one, no postage, no sender. The envelope contained a photo, same hallway now, with 2 figures, one blurred, one smiling, both facing the camera, both with her face, one younger, one older, and written on the back, in typewriter font, "You do not remember walking down the hallway, but the hallway remembers you." From that day on, every photograph taken in the East Wing, regardless of equipment, developed with a shadow in the frame, always in the same position, always chiseled, always facing away, until 1951, when the hallway was demolished. But during demolition, the photographer hired to document the process took his final shot, and the figure was back. Only now, it was facing forward, arms raised, as if waving goodbye, or hailing someone, or blocking something behind it, and on the final photo, unprompted, unedited, undeclared, appeared this caption: "We only smile when someone recognizes the moment we were made." In 1955, a new wing was added to the Jennings County home, a modest addition, just 4 rooms, intended for staff lodging. Room 4 was different, not in appearance, not in construction, in orientation, from the outside. Its window faced east from inside. The same window faced west. They checked the blueprints. The architect confirmed. Room 4 was designed to face the sunrise, but morning light never entered it. Only the last rays of sunset. Always, every day, and if you opened the window, leaned out, and looked around, the view matched nothing else on the property. No trees, no gardens, just a field, low fog, sloping earth, and something at the far end, always, just at the edge of sight, a door frame, standing alone, no walls, no house, no path, just waiting. The other rooms had standard views, the parking lot, the courtyard. Only room 4 looked out on somewhere else. When questioned, the foreman who installed the windows swore everything was standard, but the team reported something strange. They had to install the glass twice. The first pane shattered on contact with the frame. No impact, no pressure, just split, top to bottom, like it had been waiting to break. The second pane took, but none of the workers would clean it from the outside. They said the air near the frame felt reversed, like leaning too far would pull you outward, not downward. Still, room 4 was assigned, first to a nurse, then a janitor, then a visiting state inspector. All 3 lasted less than a week. Each reported the same thing. When I close my eyes in that room, I feel like I'm turning around, but when I open them, I haven't moved. The room has photographs taken inside room for show, strange, warping along the baseboards, not shadows, not flaws in the lens, stretch marks, as if the room was expanding in directions it had no permission to. Eventually, room 4 was sealed, official cause, structural stress, but the door was never removed, only locked, and the window still looks west. Even if you walk a full circle around the building, stand outside, and press your face to the glass, you'll see the field, you'll see the fog, and you'll see the doorframe, still waiting. On a rainy morning in 1961, 2 nurses at the Jennings County home arrived at opposite ends of the east hallway to begin daily rounds. Both entered separate rooms. Both found the same child. Name, Calvin Rusk, age 9. Admission, date, unknown each. Nurse recorded identical vitals. Same height, same weight, same birthmark below the left ear. But here's the impossible part. Each nurse logged the visit at the exact same time, 8:04 a.m. 2 locations. 1 child. No duplication, no twin, just multi-presence. When the nurses met at the nurses' station and compared notes, panic set in. They returned to both rooms. Both were empty. No Calvin, no sheets disturbed, no signs of anyone ever having been there. The system flagged this as an echo glitch, an internal term, a quiet one, used only when the home repeats itself. 2 days later, a boy matching Calvin's description was found sitting alone in the chapel. No one had seen him arrive. He was calm, polite, but his first words were, "I tried to stay in both. I really did." But they started arguing. When asked who they were, he replied. "The versions. One of them doesn't want to be the ending." They asked where he was from. He said, "You already met me there, and not yet there." He pointed to 3 spots on the building map, 1 on each floor, all in corners where sound never carried well. Staff brought in a psychologist. During a play session, the doctor asked him to draw his house. Instead, he drew a diagram, a perfect trifold spiral, like a recursive loop folding in on itself. He labeled the centers. Now, almost again, when the doctor asked him what it meant, Calvin said, "You only get to be one version for so long. Then you hear the others knocking. Then it's your turn to fade." He vanished that night. Security footage showed nothing, but every clock in the building stalled at 8:04 a.m. the next morning, just for a second, just long enough for the nurses to look up and see a boy at the end of the hallway, just standing, facing away, waiting for the version of himself that forgot to leave. In 1973, the Jennings County home converted part of its west wing into a small therapeutic library, mostly for quiet time, paperbacks, medical journals, nothing strange, until a woman named Frances Alder, age 63, signed out a book that didn't exist. The ledger showed her handwriting, clear, firm. Title, "The Weight of Unasked Questions." Author, N.A. Shelf. Null 3 staff were confused. There was no null section. No such book in inventory, but, Frances insisted, it was in the row where the wall gets too quiet, right where the numbers start to forget themselves. They checked the shelf. She described. Nothing, just dust and an unpainted patch of plaster. But the next day, a new shelf was there, plain, unlabeled, half-anchored, as if it had always been part of the structure but never finished. On it, 1 book, black cover. No spine text. When opened, the pages were blank, except on page 47. "You didn't borrow this. You've always been returning it." Frances smiled when shown the page. She whispered, finally, a sentence that fits. Then she began returning the book. Every night, same shelf, same position. But each morning, it would be found in a different place. Once inside the chapel, once in the east laundry bin, once under a child's bed, open to a page that simply said, "Who asked you to stop asking?" When a staff member finally tried to dispose of the book, the fire refused it. Literally, the flame bent around it, like the object was exempt from heat, exempt from combustion. Not invulnerable, just not included. Weeks later, Frances passed away in her sleep, peaceful. No trauma, but in her hand was a note, not written by her. It said, "Due back upon understanding. Penalty waived if remembered in sequence." The book was never found again, but twice a year, on the solstice, a new entry appears in the checkout ledger, always in different handwriting, always the same book, "The Weight of Unasked Questions," and always stamped, "Returned," which means the system allows truth, but only on loan. Ask the right thing, and it will give you a piece, but hold it too long, claim it as your own, and you forget how you even phrased the question. In 1982, a maintenance worker at the Jennings County home, named Ray Kellerman, fell through the floor. Literally, he was walking across the east mezzanine, a reinforced structure above the chapel, recently inspected. 1 step, then gone. No crash, no splinters, no dust, just absence. Witnesses said he didn't fall down. He fell through, as if the floor had briefly agreed he was no longer its concern. The space below was solid. No hole, no damage. But Ray, gone. Until 3 days later, a security guard doing rounds in the attic, a locked, storage-only level with no direct access from the mezzanine, heard coughing behind a rusted boiler tank. He found Ray, disoriented, weak, but alive. His first words, "I landed somewhere I wasn't allowed to understand." Medical tests showed signs of severe spatial disorientation, as if his body had been folded, then unfolded almost correctly. X-rays revealed a minor fracture in the femur, but on the opposite leg of the one he landed on. Ray described the space he fell into as gray without grayness. He said the floor he landed on wasn't solid, it was remembered, like something the building once had, but forgot to remove. He repeated one sentence over and over in the hospital. It was a future that didn't get picked. When architects reviewed the building's layout, they discovered something strange. A fifth floor had been proposed in 1910, designed, approved, but never built. Not a single beam. Yet when they scanned the area above the chapel using ground radar, a negative echo appeared, an absence shaped like a room, perfectly symmetrical, as if the floor had briefly resumed construction, just long enough to catch him. The incident was never explained, but afterward, staff noticed a new pattern. Shoes placed near that spot would shift position overnight, slightly misaligned, tilted toward the drop dot, as if waiting for someone else to step off. Ray never returned to work, but his final written statement included this line: "Gravity is just the memory of a choice you're still agreeing with. Sometimes, structures forget their limits. Sometimes they retest them. And sometimes, for a moment, they invite you to choose a version of weight no one else remembers." By 1991, the Jennings County home was nearly empty. Funding slashed, staff reduced, most wings sealed, but the north corridor remained open. Just one hallway, 5 rooms, used for overflow hospice care. That's where it happened. A volunteer, cataloging old supplies, noticed something on the wall of room 3, a sentence, faint, etched under the paint, almost invisible, not carved, not inked, more like the wall had been shaped around it. The sentence read, "This isn't where the sentence was first said, but it's where it finally listened." No one admitted to writing it. Maintenance tried to paint over it, twice. Each time, the paint dried, then peeled only in the shape of the words. Like the wall was refusing to forget. They brought in plaster, new, drywall. The sentence moved, always, reappearing just below eye level dot. Always in the same script. Eventually, they decided to leave it, but from that moment on, other sentences began appearing. One in the hallway, "What we ignore gathers mass." One above a mirror, "Reflection is repetition made visible." One carved impossibly beneath a locked sink, "If you can't read this, you're not the one remembering it." The facility kept logs. Every phrase appeared at a time when no one was present. Security footage confirmed no intruders, and yet the sentences accumulated then. One night in December, a final phrase appeared on the wall outside room 3, larger than the rest. In red, still warm, it read, "We were not made to speak, we were made to notice." After that, the writing stopped. But here's the strange part. 6 months later, the building was condemned, torn down, the walls demolished. But during salvage, a team inspecting a shipment of recovered materials opened a pallet of plasterboard. Inside, on the back of one panel, the sentence again, same shape, same depth. "We were not made to speak, we were made to notice." Which means the words weren't etched onto the building. They were inside it, waiting. Which poses a question. What if language isn't always written by thought? What if some words are instructions, not meant to be read, but to prove? The structure can feel what it's holding. By 1998, the Jennings County home was completely abandoned, but urban explorers still came. They mapped hallways, photographed decay, swore they saw shadows where no light should reach. That's how the last room was found. Not by sight, by absence. A group of 3 explorers, 2 men, 1 woman, documented every hallway with chalk marks as they moved. Standard practice. Tag your entrance, so you can trace your way back. They explored the east wing, dead ends, empty rooms. No surprises. Until they looped back toward the entrance, and past a room none of them remembered entering. Door wide open. Chalk mark already there, same initials, same handwriting, same timestamp. But they'd never drawn it. Inside the room, nothing, just a chair, a bulb hanging from a wire, and on the floor footprints their own, mapped in dust, perfectly matched. 3 in, 3 standing, 3 walking out, but no second set coming in. Like they'd always been leaving. One of them, the woman turned to speak, but her voice dropped away. Not silence. Something beneath silence. Like speaking pulled the room's attention toward her. She mouthed one word. Go. They ran. Later, reviewing the photos, they found something worse. In the moment they'd entered the room, the camera, glitched, not a blur, a duplication, 1 frame, 2 overlapping exposures, same room, same people, but subtly different positions, like 2 versions of the same moment trying to agree with each other in one layer. The man had his hand on the doorknob. In the other, the door was already closed, and between the layers, a 4th shape, not fully formed, head tilted, arms too long, body oriented away from every visible wall, like it was standing in a wall that wasn't there yet. 1 month later, the building was leveled, but something stayed, to this day. Hikers in the woods behind the property report strange dreams after passing the ruins. They speak of finding a door in their homes that leads to nowhere, of rooms that shift slightly each morning, of chalk marks on their floors they didn't draw, and of one shared sentence. You're not in the room until you try to leave it, which means the Jennings County home never closed. It simply noticed no one was watching and moved to where we wouldn't look next.